So this is the first fireside chat we have for the year of 2020.
Yep.
Yep, and we were going to have someone else join us today, and this is for the listeners. Another writer from the O Solar System website. His name is Dylan. Unfortunately, he can't make it today. I did not get the mail. I think Dylan replied to you and not replied to all, so I didn't see it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So, we'll just roll on, and I have tons of news to share, and I think I would be really interested to know Rob, what have you been up to as well?
Right. Yes. Well, I've been. I've got three things on the boil now. Three bits of writing. I've
Mm-hmm.
got the usual serial Uranian Throne, which I'm accumulating notes for episode 14.
Mm-hmm.
I've got another serial, Outlaws of Neptune, which I've got the episode 3 ready, prepared for February the 1st, which is when the next Tales to Astound is on. And the other night I had a nightmare, a really bad dream,
Oh,
and I wrote some notes on it, and I'd like to turn it into a horror story.
wow. Okay, branching
So
out there,
I'll
Rob.
put that on the website at some point so everyone else can get as scared as I was.
Could you make that a science fiction horror story so it's kind of like Space
Yes, I can
Cthulhu?
quite easily. Yes.
Oh man, that sounds awesome. Looking forward to it. Yeah. So it sounds like you have a lot of content coming up. That's great.
Yes. I suppose though I'm still dependent on other people
Hmm.
contributing as well. I wouldn't want just to put my own stuff on Tales to Astound.
Right on. Yeah.
It wouldn't really seem very good.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah. Anything else happening for you? Any New Year's resolution or anything like that?
No, not really. I don't actually make New Year's resolutions as
Oh,
such
is that
because
so?
I figure out if you don't make them, you can't break them. If you see what I mean.
Yeah, I've been walking around asking people that what their New Year's resolution are, and that seems to be a very common reply.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
you can't trust the universe to play ball. You know, when you make a resolution, you, you
That's true.
yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I'll share a little bit of news on my end. So
Yeah,
unlike you, Rob, I have been a very lazy writer. I've not been able to progress very much on the story itself, and the reason for that is because I've been I've been up to a lot of very interesting things. So I've started doing some artwork to go with my stories, and they're part of a drive to sort of bring the visualization of the story into clearer focus. So when people see the images, they would have like a much better feel of the atmosphere that I'm trying to drive towards.
yes, great. If you can do that, that's great. Yeah,
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 and so I've been working on that, and that has taken up a fair chunk of time because art takes time, and now I got to split my attention between the art as well as the story writing. So the story writing part has kind of slowed down. On top of that, I was thinking since I already started making the artwork, I may as well print them on T-shirts and start making them available to anyone who's interested.
mm,
And
yes,
I've been working on that as well, going down, talking to textile artists, Trying to put everything together. It's a bit more. As with any new thing, it's a little bit more than I expected it would take. A little bit more work and time than I expected it would take. Plus, there is a there's a comic convention happening soon in February in Vancouver, and I've applied for a booth. I got the booth, so I'm busy setting things up for that as well. And this would all be like a part of a bigger drive to push the Distant Sun universe, the adventures of Longtail into the public.
Mm.
And so this
Yes.
is all very exciting for me. The unfortunate thing is, well, I mean, the great thing is also I'm doing this all by myself. It's been very challenging, very interesting, very exciting. But it does mean I have to take time off from the story writing, and it's been reduced. My timeline has been pushed back quite a bit. I was initially expecting to have the full first book in December really, but now I have to. I don't know when the entire book, the entire first book, will be published at this point in time.
Yeah.
Hopefully, sometime this year.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm wondering actually about the Adventures of Longtail. Where it's at the moment a bit inconsistent in that I have all the episodes except the first one on my site, and I was expecting that you would only want me to display the current episode, but at the moment I've got the current and one or two further back, and I just haven't got the first one. I'm wondering if perhaps one should rectify the inconsistency there. Either I should have all of them, or I should only have the most recent one.
Oh,
But at the moment, sort of halfway between.
yes,
I don't
that's
want to
right.
take traffic away from your site. I think
No, of
maybe,
course. Well,
you know,
yeah, thanks. That was considered. Actually, I did notice that, and I was going to get in touch with you about that. Thanks for bringing it up. Totally slipped my mind. So I would appreciate it if you could take the earlier episodes away. Yeah.
so whenever you give me a new episode, I take the early ones away
Yes.
as a matter
Yes.
of course.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll make a note about that.
Thank you,
So,
Rob. Yeah, I appreciate that.
of earlier episodes. And I can assume, can't I, that you have them on your site, obviously.
Yes, they are.
Yes. I just refer to your site, which I already have the link for.
Thank you. That would be great.
Right, made a note. That's on my to-do list.
Awesome.
So, another thing I've been doing recently is I've started putting more excerpts from various stories on Guess the World, the Guess the World competition, which for a while was the most popular thing on the site. It's not quite as looked at now as it was.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a phase in which I got hundreds of views every month for that.
Guess the World. So you put up an it sounds like you put up an excerpt and people guess where that comes from.
It's describing, yes, where the setting is, and that was very, very popular. It's funny how on my website things come in phases.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Clark Ashton Smith phase, in which the page devoted to Clark Ashton Smith was the most popular of all the author pages, and Edgar Rice Burroughs page was not very popular at all. And now the Edgar Rice Burroughs page is easily the most popular author page. It's in fact just about the most popular page, except for the home page. I don't understand why there are these dramatic changes in popularity of various pages. It's an endless source of fascination.
But the great thing about your site is you have a ton of variety for people, and they could go to wherever they are interested in.
Yes, I suppose that perhaps that's the reason that they keep discovering new things on it, and they can't give their attention to everything at once. So some things get more popular. That means other things get not looked at so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you do have a great deal of variety, and I think that's like something for everybody. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't get as much feedback as I want, though. Like you, I mean, you were complaining about lack of feedback the other day, and I have the same. I find that I get lots of attention, but it's silent attention. You know, people look at the site. I've had really good. Well, for me, it's good anyway. Over 300 people sometimes a day looking at the site, which for me is good. But most of them don't say anything.
Well, what I find is, so what is a demographic?
Well, I don't know. In terms of countries, I know that it's more than half is the USA, but then the other half, usually the second most popular, the second most frequent demographic is France.
France.
10% of my viewers come from France, usually, something like that, and 1% or less than 1% from my own country, Great Britain, which is a bit
disappointing.
Disappointing, yes, and also rather peculiar. But the French, I don't suppose it's just expatriate Britons living in France. It must be real French people looking at my site, which means that they must be very good at English. So I've only got one page that actually has any French in it, which is an analysis of the works of a French science fiction author, and I quote from him in his own language. But that's only one page out of nearly 400. So.
Oh, that's a very interesting mix. Well, do you know the ages of the people who read your?
I don't know. I don't, and I don't suppose they'd tell me if I asked them. That is to say, if I put some appeal on the diary page or the Facebook page or something saying, "Please tell me how old you are," I don't suppose I'd get any response.
Well,
so
yeah, we can talk more a little bit about that later on, I suppose. I did some of my marketing on Facebook, and I find that my age group, surprisingly, because I was thinking I would be hitting the 35 to and above age range, but it seems like the people who are hitting the my Facebook page, they are mostly between 18 to 25.
All right.
But then I don't have a lot of traffic on my Facebook page yet. I've had a lot of how do I say this? I'm still trying to figure out the online marketing part of it, and just trying to get the word out. And what I found is that it's particularly difficult to advertise with just words. And like a fair amount of imagery is needed to drive attention on social media, and that's also part of the reason why I started doing all the artwork. So hopefully, in the coming months, I would see a bit more traffic, and then I'll have a better idea of who is reading what, and the reason why I brought up the age thing, just to tie back, because I don't want to ramble. I think maybe the older crowd would be a bit more reticent on commenting, if you know what I mean.
Yes, I do. Yes. One problem though for me is that I say to myself, well, all right, just supposing I had some way of finding out how old all my readers were, would I alter my behaviour at all in accordance with that knowledge. And I don't think I would.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I would just carry on as I am, no
Mm-hmm.
matter how old or young the readership were, because I just feel that the best thing to do is to be myself.
Mm.
And therefore, I don't suppose there's any point in trying to find out, although it would gratify my curiosity to some extent if I learned more about the demographic.
Mm.
But actually, more than the ages of the people, I'd be more interested in what they thought rather than how old they were.
I see. So it sounds like you would much rather not, I suppose, find out about. You're more interested in what they think rather than who they are, huh?
Yes, yes.
Well, yeah, I suppose we could take that offline a little bit. I don't want the fireside chat to be like about how to get readers to
No, no.
respond to us. Um, we were originally going to talk about more old solar system stories today with Dylan, but unfortunately you couldn't make it.
No, no.
Yeah.
So, did you have a particular theme in mind? Because we can still talk about it, even if he's not, even though he's not here.
Well, I was actually going to just like talk about just going to like set the table for like talking about the old solar system stories that we like, and we have talked about and we've read. Unfortunately, because Dylan is not here, I mean, we could still go on with that, but I haven't had time to think of anything new because I only just found out. Um, yeah, so I'll be upfront. Lately, I haven't. So I've managed to squeeze in a couple of books in the past few months, which is great, but they're not science fiction stories. They are more like so I was reading this two Stephen King books. One is one of his new one, The Institute, and then I was rereading The Shining.
Oh yes, I've read that.
Yes. And I went back to Stephen King mostly because like I've really been trying to make my characters more compelling, and he is the he
He's
is
good at
in
that.
my mind he is the best character writer that I have ever read, and I just love the way he brings characters to life. So I've been reading it not so much not so much as for pleasure, but more of trying to absorb,
Yes.
his writing techniques and his writing style. Well, no, that's not quite the right way to put it. It's a lot harder to pin down that feel of crafting a character that is not, I wouldn't say believable, but fully three-dimensional with motivations, with like a really rich and varied layers to them.
Yes, yes. I would say another writer who sometimes is very good at that is Philip K. Dick.
Mm.
In some of his books, not in all of them. I think it's sometimes it's very satisfying when an author can write a book from different points of view. He can have each chapter written from a different point of view. And if it's done properly, it can work very well. If it's not done properly, then the reader starts to feel disorientated because of the multiple changes of points of view. Another thing that can be done, although it's quite rare, but I personally like to do it, is to write a scene in which several points of view are expressed at at the same time, virtually at the same time. And oddly enough, one writer who can do this, I've noticed, is Agatha Christie, the famous detective story writer. She can sometimes write from one point of view and then switch to another person who's with that person and get what he's thinking. And it somehow it works. So it can work to have these shifts.
Well, I do find I play with that a lot, and part of it is in my story. It's a bit of necessity because the long tail, the main character, is mute, and so there aren't a lot of ways to express what.
No, not unless you play God and get inside his head and
exactly,
say what he's thinking.
exactly.
Yes.
Well, I mean, it's been so. I will just briefly talk about this because I want to throw the conversation back to you later on, Rob. But I do want to touch on this a little bit. Um, because now my story has progressed a little bit, and the current chapter that I'm editing and I'm hoping to get it to you by the end of this month is now the long tail has started to travel with someone else.
Right.
And it's so challenging to describe, to just have like a sort of interaction, to sort of like describe the interactions between the long tail and his traveling companion, just because the long tail can't talk.
Yes.
And there's nothing like sign language in the Red Desert, so it's been a lot of very indirect, and there's a lot of misunderstanding and conflict that is potentially there, ready to be exploited. But I feel I haven't been able to take full advantage of it. Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like you set yourself quite a big challenge there.
Yeah. I mean, in a sense, it's great. I will slowly as I continue to write. I hope that my writing skills and my writing ability can rise to the challenge. But right now, it's I have to remind myself not to play that God perspective so much, and to bring a lot back into the scene description instead, to describe like the tension and conflict.
Yes. Although, in my opinion, the omniscient author style, the playing God style, is actually quite fair enough, because it's getting back to probably an earlier form of storytelling, and it was only in probably comparatively modern times that people started making up rather limiting rules about what writers should be able to do and not do.
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, like, for example, Hemingway had this thing about leaving out adverbs. He didn't like adverbs, so he just wrote very simple sentences, very stark. But that was him. But nobody else should have to do that.
No, that's true. I mean, I guess it's just my background, coming from like the show business and entertainment background. A lot of the things we do is we try to show, we don't tell.
Yes.
And that makes for much more dramatic television.
Yes, good in films and television.
Yeah.
Although even then, you can have a voiceover that
Absolutely.
tells.
Morgan Freeman, the voice of God.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think some books would benefit if you tried to film, for example, A Voyage to Arcturus. I don't know if you've read that one, but I think a voiceover would be a big help in that one. It's a very philosophical science fiction book, but also very vivid and hallucinatorily real.
I see.
It's like a vivid dream.
I see. Okay.
Anyway, yeah.
Yeah. So I want to throw the conversation back to you, Rob. What have you read recently in the
What
2
have I read
months?
recently? I haven't read a lot of science fiction recently. I did read one book called. I usually reread books. When I read now, it's usually rereading old favourites. And there's one by J.T. Mackintosh called World Out of Mind, and I quite enjoyed that. It was about a society of the future in which everybody is graded according to ability. And,
a very Plato take on that society.
And it's the story of an attempted alien invasion. Some really brainy aliens disguise themselves as human down to the last atom and come and try to soften us up. But they succeed so well in disguising themselves as human that they actually start to feel human. So their loyalty changes and they end up being loyal to Earth and defending Earth against their own people.
Oh, wow.
Because, it's the logic of their intelligence has made them too successful in infiltrating, so that they actually become psychologically Earth people. So that's the twist in that story.
That's very interesting. There's a lot of I'm sorry to interrupt. I because when you were describing that, I was just thinking of a lot of those police dramas from Hong Kong back in the 80s and early 90s, because back in the day, Hong Kong has had to deal with a lot of secret societies and mafias and the like, and they would send police to infiltrate those organizations, and so they're like undercover cops, and undercover cops often run into that psychological and emotional tension where they start to identify with the criminals instead. Yeah.
Yes.
Very, very interesting premise.
Yeah. It's an interesting theme. But as for more traditional old solar system stories, the trouble now is that I know them so well that often quite a long time goes by before I reread them. Although I have to forget them a little bit in order to want to reread them again.
I see.
The number of times I've read C.S. Lewis's Out of the Silent Planet and Perelandra, for example, I've just lost count of how many times I've read them.
Wow.
So I'm sure I will read them again in maybe a year or two, but at the moment it's not quite the right time.
So it sounds like there aren't that many new materials for you to read, just in terms of the whole solar system.
That's right, because I suppose I get a bit more choosy now as far as how well written the stories are. I've been looking quite a lot on the archives of science fiction magazines, which are now online. You can read quite a lot of them. Not all of them. Some of them, I think, that publish stories which are still in copyright, you can't actually access. But a lot of them, where the stories haven't been reprinted, you can now read online. For example, Planet Stories. You can actually go to the Planet Stories website and read them. You can actually read the stories, and I've been doing that, and it's very interesting, but also in a way it's a bit disappointing. And a lot of these old stories aren't that. They're very interesting, but they're not actually good in themselves. They're good for what they show me as to how people tried to write about things.
Right.
Interested in what people are trying to do, but sometimes they don't really succeed, and it's because they shy away from the challenge. For example, if you're writing about the moon, I know we've talked about the moon before, we're writing about the moon, and the big challenge would be to show a lunar civilization, to depict a lunar civilization, preferably on the surface of the moon, and that would be quite a challenge, because you'd have to invent a reason why they can live on the surface of the moon, something that's not too unbelievable. H.G. Wells just about managed it. Even he, though, what he did was he had that the vegetation was born and died during every lunar day.
Yes, I remember.
Read the first Men in the Moon, but
yeah,
everything dies at the lunar night, and the seeds sprout again in the lunar day. And I suppose the colours must be such that you wouldn't be able to tell from a telescope here.
Yes, I remember.
It look grey, but it's still vegetation. And the main lunar civilization is down below in the caverns. But I would prefer maybe on the other side of the moon. There could have been something on the other side of the moon which would explain we can't see it. But that would be the challenge. And writers tend to veer away from that challenge. They have, for example, it was in the distant past of the moon, or it's deep down in caverns, or something. But they don't dare have a direct story about a civilization on the surface. What else can I say?
Well,
also, even authors that try and write about the giant planets, Jupiter and Saturn. Paul Anderson wrote a book which I've read quite a few times now, called Three Worlds to Conquer, and some of it is set on Jupiter, and he's really brilliant at describing these Jovians. They're sort of centaur-type beings, and they can exist under Jovian pressure, Jovian air pressure, and so on. Now, he has a solid surface on Jupiter, which is,
well, there is a solid center, if I remember my astronomy correctly. Yeah, there is a solid center. It's just really far in.
Well, it wouldn't really be a surface, in that it would be covered with a layer of compacted metallic hydrogen or something like that. So you would never actually be able to stand, even in a high pressure suit. You would never.
No, that's just not possible. We'll just be crushed. But I think I remember reading, and I think this might be Isaac Asimov's idea. I think it was Lucy in the Sky or something like that. He speculated that the core of Jupiter must be a gigantic diamond.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense if there's like carbon, and then with all that pressure, it would become a giant piece of diamond, larger than
what would
the Earth.
surround that diamond, you see, it would be something. The atmosphere would be so dense as to be virtually solid, and therefore there wouldn't actually be a detectable surface. It would shade out. The density would gradually decrease outwards.
Quite possibly.
It wouldn't be a definable surface. I don't know. But anyway, we're talking about the old solar system, where you don't have to follow scientific accuracy, as long as you keep to what I might call scientific legend. That is to say, the various ideas which science has given us, and which have since been shown to be wrong, but once they're given us, they're not taken away again. They become part of the legend, you see.
Yeah.
So you can talk about a Jupiter with a solid surface as long as you pay lip service to the idea that there's got to be a lot of atmospheric pressure and so on. But if you do that, you then ought to be able to build a civilization and have a jolly good story with profound societies and so on. And Paul Anderson comes the nearest to doing that in his book Three Worlds to Conquer. But even so, it's not really satisfactory. One could do with more about it, like Edgar Rice Burroughs' Barsoom, where there's lots of adventures on Mars, and he does a really good job of building a Martian society with its own values and its own character. He does a brilliant job there. I don't know of anyone else who's managed to equal that planetary world building kind of.
So you're saying like those old stories that you've been reading from the amazing story, the magazines online, they start out with a nice idea, but they could not bring it into fruition because they shied away from the challenge of bringing it to life.
Yes, yes, that's right. Yes.
Have you? I'm just curious. Have you heard of this guy called Vernon Vinge?
The name rings a bell. I think I must have read some of his stuff.
A fire. I think the book that comes to mind is A Fire Upon the Deep.
I don't know that one.
Oh, so he wrote two books that I've read, and I don't know if he wrote anymore, but so these two books are really interesting. I think the first one I read was A Fire Upon the Deep, which is not chronologically the way things happened. So he wrote one book, and that's the first one, and then he wrote a prequel to that book, and I read the prequel first. I didn't read the actual one that he wrote. So until later. So I remember quite vividly that in that story he described a race of spiders.
Oh yes.
Yes, and he I can't quite recall how the story went, but the spiders, they have a way of mind melding with some humans, but he was able to describe the civilization of the spiders really well. And I think you would get a lot of pleasure out of reading that. I think it is not old solar system in the sense that they don't he doesn't have that sort of like, I would say, campy feel of some of the old solar system stories, but he definitely has a very lived in feel to his universe. Like the universe was in his world building is teeming with life. And his prequel book, which I cannot remember the name of, is really interesting because it wrote about what so that prequel book had a character, and that character later on went on a wild goose chase. In fact, I think I remember that the spaceship that he traveled on was called the Wild Goose Chase or something like that. And that sequel book talked about what happened to him, but there was like a gap of many years in between, and he described and the most vivid thing I remember from that sequel book was he had a number of I can't remember if they're creatures or characters, but they were living on a time span much faster than humans. Like they're like the speed at which they think is are like computers. And
Right.
he went in to try to describe what life is like for those guys. And I thought
Yeah.
that was very interesting. He really dove into it. So you might like Vernon Binge.
I've made a note of that. It reminds me a bit of the creatures living on the neutron star in Dragon's Egg by R.L. Forward. They live very fast. They have lifespans of about half an hour, but that half hour to them is as long as one of our lifetimes.
Yeah. So they are living on such a different time perspective. I think is the closest I can come to describe it. Yeah.
Yeah, there was something else I wanted to say about these. I've forgotten what it is now. There's also I was talking a bit earlier about being disappointed. There's also the feeling that maybe I've read all that there is to read on the great old solar system stories, that maybe there aren't any more left to discover, but I can't be sure because a few years back, for example, I found an Edmund Hamilton novel called Treasure on Thunder Moon, which is really good, and it's set partly on Uranus's moon Oberon, which is depicted as a volcanic moon with strange life forms on it.
Right.
Really brilliant stuff. I'd never heard of it before, so if I can still occasionally find a good book that I've never heard of before, then there's still hope. The intervals between finding such a book grow longer and longer.
Well, yes. All the low-hanging fruits have been plucked.
Yes.
Yeah, I know the feeling, man. I'm very I feel well. It's very. I really feel that because I think I mentioned is one of my favorite authors is John Wyndham, and there's just no more John Wyndham books.
No. Yeah. Have you read all his novels?
Pretty much all of his novels. There's one unfinished one that I did not read, but because it was not finished, I was like, man, I don't want to read this.
Oh, unfinished! I haven't heard of this.
It was a short story. I think I'm gonna just tap onto Wikipedia real quick and yeah, he has a number of he wrote a number of books, but there was one that was.
You say unfinished?
Yeah.
I never heard of an unfinished one.
Okay. I'm gonna. I mean, I didn't want to read the unfinished one just because it would be really.
Tantalizing.
Well, yeah, it's like, oh, I want more.
Yes. Like listening to Schubert's Unfinished Symphony. Yeah. Perhaps you're thinking of Webb, but that was finished, really.
I think. Oh, Perhaps I was thinking of A Plan for Chaos.
Oh. It's a title I don't know. I've never heard of it.
Well, it was published in 2009, obviously after his death. But,
There was a C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis started a book that he never finished called. Well, it's called The Dark Tower. It's just a fragment.
Oh.
It's very, very good.
Man, yeah. So that would that reading that kind of stuff would kill me. Yeah, I mean, I would be reading it and what happened next? I want more. And I'll be like, oh my god, no. Unfinished series are like the worst thing ever. Yeah. Well, so so one of the things that I have started to, so I'm thinking of rereading. I mean, just talking about rereading books. Some of the Lucky Star novels,
Mm.
the Isaac Asimov Lucky Star novels, and
Yeah.
part of the reason is I found rather to my surprise, I think there's a lot of very old Western movie, spaghetti Western movie feel to my writing,
Mm.
in the sense that it's a lot of uh, people traveling between places, and then
Yes.
that it's just a lot of that traveling between places, and there's a sense of like a very well, so maybe the readers don't get this feel, but I've already written quite a fair bit of the book now. Like I finished like the first draft, like the story has been concluded, and it's basically right now I'm just like waiting. I'm just like not waiting. I'm just like making all the words flow better, and then
Yeah.
restructuring some scenes and stuff like that, and redescribing a few things. So there is a very cantina feel to it, and that's why I kind of wanted to go back to rereading the Lucky Star novels,
Right.
just because that gave me that that did evoke that kind of sense in me when I was reading those when I was a kid, and I wanted to
Mm.
see what it was like after all this time.
Mm. I found those. I didn't read them when I was a child. I read them, when I was already quite old,
Mm.
just a few years ago, in fact. And I found them quite surprising. Uh, Overall, I thought they were a bit disappointing because
Mm-hmm.
they didn't give me the sort of solar system I'm really interested in.
Mm.
But I found it quite an eye-opener as regards Asimov's writing skills. In some ways, he surprised me. He wrote quite a lot about violence in those books,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
particularly Pirates of the Asteroids.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, this isn't the cerebral Isaac Asimov I know, where things are mostly dialogue and all that.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote he was getting quite a tough guy in that book,
Yeah.
which is interesting. But
Yeah, that there is a lot of that. I do remember there was a lot of that conflict with the asteroid outwarders or something like that, and that has a very strong feel of like you would have a town, and then they have a sheriff, and then like the outlaws would come, and then the
Clint
sheriff would
Eastwood
fight off the
comes in.
outlaws.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
on a cosmic scale. Uh,
yes.
and while I don't have an actual band of bandits coming in, but the just the environment surrounding the Red Desert and all that has a very strong vibe, just because the environment is so dangerous.
Mm, yes, yes. I think there's quite a good open-endedness in your um, stories.
Oh.
Which I like the open-endedness. I'm not so much interested um, uh, in the sort of conflicts and so on. I'm
Mm-hmm.
more interested in, being me, more interested in actual backgrounds than in the foreground, if you see what I mean.
Mm. Mm.
Um, because I sometimes feel like I'm I'm visiting these places, and I I'm interested in the cultures and how things work, and I'm mildly interested in the characters and what happens to them. But what really interests me is the feel of the actual place and the history.
I'm very happy to hear that because that is really what I was trying to achieve. To make a very interesting backdrop to allow uh, the imagination of the readers to take over because I feel like that is how I want to engage my readers.
Yes, it's not always. It's not the only way of doing it. And I don't know if you read the stories in on my site, Tales to Astound,
Some of
every
them.
month. But David England, apart from you and me and Dylan, the other main contributor is David England. In fact, he's I think the most frequent contributor of all of us. Every month he has something, one part of his serials.
I need to learn from the guy.
You need to what?
I need to learn from him.
Well, I was going to say, he, um, I would like him to concentrate more on atmosphere and place, but he doesn't do it as much as I wanted him to do it. But to make up for that, he's very good on character, and he's very good on drama, on suspense, and I'm good on dialogue. So his stories are readable because of the people, and they're not so interesting because of the settings. I don't find them very interesting for the settings. He doesn't seem to take a lot of trouble over them. But as I say, his people are his characters are very good.
Well, I mean, we all have our strengths, right?
And he probably thinks the opposite of me, that, my settings are fine, but my characters probably could do with a bit of improvement. I don't know.
So I read. I don't remember what the name is. One of your stories that you co-wrote with Dylan. Was it a Uranus one where the it was a bunch of mineral life forms, I think.
No, it was Mission to the 10th Planet.
Mission to the 10th Planet.
Yes,
I thought that was very interesting. I really liked how you and Dylan explored the kind of like the psychology of what it must be like to be a mineral life form. The way.
Well, I took care of that side of it. Dylan's job was to give the human angle. You see,
right?
He was good at that because he made the spaceship and the human explorers. He made them convincing in a way that I couldn't have done. He had the jargon at his fingertips. You see.
So Dylan sounds like Dylan is better at writing human drama, and you're more of an alien drama guy.
I'm good at mineral life.
You think like a rock.
Yeah, that's right. The psychology of a rock. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I thought that was very interesting. Because like I remember playing this video game ages ago when I was a kid. It's called Star Command, and it's one of those games where the developers they were quite cryptic and very opaque about the way they leave for clues in game to complete the game, and so without a sort of walkthrough is actually very hard to finish the game. So that game came with a manual with a short story written by Robert Silverberg, and all the clues on how to proceed is actually in that short story. And I remember devouring that short story. It was so interesting because there's a very ancient life form in the universe, and that life form is a kind of very energetic mineral.
Energetic mineral.
Yes. So I use the word energetic because the later civilizations that came used those minerals as rocket fuel.
Right. I hope they didn't mind that too much.
So that was a so that's like an inherent conflict set up within that, and the minerals they were like they were trying to bring about the end of all uh, carbon-based life form in the universe, and their scheme is millennia in the making, if you know what I mean. Just because, again, of the time perspective, they think in such long terms.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't blame them for trying to wipe out carbon-based life if the carbon-based life uses them as rocket fuel.
Yeah.
I mean, that's grounds for provocation, I think.
Very true. Yeah. So when I was reading the mission to the 10th planet, I was that was the first thing I thought of, and that was a huge part of what made me keep reading that series.
Hmm. So there we are.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that story ended a bit too abruptly, actually. I'd quite like to go back to it and add something, but I'm too busy at the moment. Anyway, and Dylan's too busy too. He's moving to California sometime
Oh.
this year, I think. Yeah.
Wow, that's a huge move. He's in
From
Chicago.
Chicago to California. Yeah, it's about 2,000 miles, isn't it? Something like that.
Yeah.
So, so anyway, there we go.
Is that why he couldn't make it today?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, he's
Okay.
got locked on. Um, oh well, never mind. I
Well,
expect he'll be when he's settled down. He'll
yeah,
come
we
back.
could always tap him again when he settled down. But the great thing, if he does move to California, is that he and I will be on the same time zone.
Oh, I see. Yes, so
Yeah.
make these things easier. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I hope there aren't any big earthquakes when he gets there.
Oh, at this point, I
Don't,
think
don't,
California might be. I think wildfires might be more of a concern than.
more of a concern.
Yeah, they've had this horrible, horrible fire a few months back, and it was just like it just damaged so much stuff. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Do you know which city he's moving to?
No, I don't.
Okay.
He hasn't said much. I expect he will, but so far I don't know anything, and I don't know why he's going either.
Fair
But
enough. That's probably something he wants to keep private. Okay, so we're coming up to an hour, and it's probably getting late for you over there.
maybe, yeah.
Yeah. So, is there anything that you want to share with the readers as like a last thing?
No, I don't think so. Except I would like to pray that the readers give me some more feedback on the site and some ideas, because I really appreciate it when that happens. And of course, if they can actually write some stories for the site, that would be the best thing of all.
Well, I would definitely echo that. I got a very nicely written comment when I published my first chapter on your site from a guy way
Yes, I
out in
remember that.
Texas. I really appreciated that letter because he went through a lot of trouble to write out what he felt, and I was
That was
really.
Troy Jones, I think.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I was very very happy to reply to him. Yeah, and so on my end, uh, like I said, I hope to get the next chapter over to you at the end of this month, Rob.
Right. When
Uh,
you do, I'll make sure that it's the only one there, so that the readers are referred to your
yes,
website.
right on. Thank you very much. I did a little bit of change. I've now so So perhaps maybe you can check a little bit. I have changed the prologue to just chapter one.
Right,
So
right.
the first chapter could be the prologue on the OSS website, if you know what I mean.
Well, it's not there anymore, you see. That's
Oh
the thing
yeah.
that's taken off.
So that might so okay, so that's great. But I know that this is going to be a bit of confusion for me. That chapter is the prologue, but I know how confusing it is for readers, so I just changed it to chapter one.
Yeah. Well, that's good. It's good that you've got the bulk of it on your site now, because you've got oversight now of how you want it arranged.
Yeah.
And when you send me your next story, you could think about, well, obviously think about what you want to call it. Instead of calling it, Sleeping Fury episode, whatever, you could perhaps have a name,
A
another
name for
name
the
for
chapter.
it. Yes.
I
Or you could say
yeah.
The Adventures of Longtail, chapter whatever it is, or part whatever it is. And then I'll say for previous chapters or previous episodes or parts or whatever you want to call them, see.
That's a great idea. I could work in a very short summary of like a title summary of what's going on in between inside the chapter itself, and it gives like the readers like straight away what the chapter is about. Yeah, that's a great idea. I'll think about that. Um, aside from
Like
that,
science fiction magazines, they used to do that.
yes,
They
yes,
see,
absolutely. So aside from that, I have my, as I said, I have my Facebook. Um, I'm also starting an Instagram. I also, um, so I would be also providing you with a bit of a write up just in terms of update on what's happening on a distant sun. And then I'll be writing a little bit about my plans, especially the Fan Expo convention in Vancouver, and I would give a more blow by blow updates both on the Facebook as well as the Instagram on how all that preparation is coming along, as well as the T-shirts and stuff like that. You know, it would be interesting material. I think there's a lot of stuff in there that I never thought about when I got the bright idea to print my stuff on the T-shirts. A lot of logistic stuff. Yeah. So aside from that, I think I'm toying also with the idea of changing the name of the sandworms in my story. I might start calling them something else. I found a Sanskrit word called Vikrut, and I thought that would be a pretty cool way to call that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sandworm sounds too derivative from Dune, anyway. I think for a science fiction fan, not for the general public.
Perhaps. I mean, that's it. There is that for sure. My main issue, though, was that I find myself starting to name everything. I have a sandworm, I have a sand mew, I have a rock toad, and so it's starting to get a little bit boring.
Yeah.
And I want to introduce a little bit more variety in my naming, basically. Yeah, and there's a part of the cultural backstory which I haven't fully shown to the readers, uh, and that might come out in time. But anyone that's read the story would notice that there seems to be two ways of naming things. In the sense that you have uh, say Red City, for instance, it's called Red City, and then you have the sandworms that are called sandworms, and then you have the rock toads. But in scattered in between, you have other things like there's this plant that's very hallucinogenic called datang, and it's written in a different form, and it's very inconsistent with everything else, and there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that, but it's not something I want to go into in like this first series of books.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, after all, names in the real world often seem inconsistent. You know,
Yes.
a jumble of sources for words,
Yeah.
especially in English, which is
Yes.
borrowed from all sorts of languages.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you for coming online to chat with me, Rob. I hope your weekend was good. I hope your next week will be even better. And
Yep.
I really look forward to all the content that you're gonna push out in the coming months, especially the space Cthulhu thing.
The what? Sorry.
The space Cthulhu thing, the space horror.
Oh yes.
I'm really looking forward to that one, bro.
I'll try and make it as horrible as I can.
Yes, wonderful. All right, Rob.
See you then.
Great conversation. I'll see you soon. Bye.
See you soon. Bye.